Hi, and thanks for the introduction. To Mr. Taylor, to the Planning Committee and the audience, I am delighted to join you in celebrating resiliency during Dallas County Coalition of Community Justice Agencies' 22nd Annual Recognition Program. During PPPS Week, my staff and I get a chance to visit the offices across the country to express our gratitude for your work. I'm actually in a hotel in Florida as we speak. And I want to apologize in advance that I cannot participate in the full program, but I certainly am thrilled to play a part. And on behalf of the staff and the members of the Board of Directors, I bring a message of hope and encouragement. I really love the theme you've selected, celebrating our resilience. It is apropos to our time. It ties into the overall theme for PPPS Week, which is restoring trust and creating hope, something we borrowed from the Women's History Month back in March. Because resilience is important and it goes hand in hand with hope. Our resilience has been tested like never before. The pandemic, the recession, political discourse, protests, racial divide, you name it. It's been 2 inexplicable years that required major shifts in our work. And I believe it will take lots of years, even decades, to truly understand the impact of this particular time, I should say, on our world history. I imagine the smart folks in places like Yale and Harvard are already preparing to conduct case studies. And the pandemic was, 100 years ago. So there is no playbook, the last pandemic, I should say. Speaking of studies, APPA is partnering with the National Institute of Corrections to conduct a study on community corrections responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan is to survey as many community corrections professional agencies in the country, but I expect that the results will be mixed. There will be some onions, but more importantly, there'll be lots of roses. In other words, reasons to celebrate our resiliency and to be thankful. You know, there are about 90 to 100,000 community corrections professionals in America who supervise millions of adults and juveniles. And despite the challenges and stressors, we don't want to be stuck in a survival mode. We want to thrive in order to totally commit to success stories. You know, each day there's an opportunity for us to have a positive impact on individuals under supervision, their families, and the community. So we should never underestimate, never understate, or undervalue our responsibilities. Think about it. Community supervision contributes to the safety of all citizens, either directly or indirectly. And this week, we celebrate our contribution to this country and our resiliency. So I am going to highlight just a few ways to celebrate and the importance of resilience as a core quality. I'm going to talk a little bit about embracing failure, about developing hope, lifting others up, and fostering flexibility. And I'm going to start with embracing failure. You know, every human being went through trials during the past 2 years. I certainly didn't meet most of my goals in 2022 or 21, and I'm struggling to meet some of them in 2022. Our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, said failure is an important part of our growth in developing resilience and not to be afraid of it. All that said, it's all about the journey. So no matter where you are in your journey in this field, please keep moving forward. As you continue to strive to grow as individuals and as teams, know that it's making a difference in the lives of those you supervise and those you serve. You know, the topic of failure reminds me of a conversation I had with a young PO who said that just before the pandemic, she felt like a failure and she was thinking about leaving the field. In March of 2020, she viewed her probationers as caseload numbers. But when virtual supervision occurred, then she got an unexpected front row seat into their lives. She saw their cute pets and the cute kids. She watched them nurture their kids. She even witnessed a mom changing a newborn's diaper. She heard of their daily struggles brought on by the pandemic, and not much different than her own. And as she teared up during our brief conversation, she said she is now clear that these are indeed human beings. As such, she now serves them with more compassion and patience. This, my friends, is an example of resiliency. Her spirit is improved. She is learning and growing, and she's more centered. So let's rise up just like she did. Another way to celebrate resiliency is to develop hope. If you look around this screen, all of us have bounced back from networks, or setbacks, I should say, not networks, well, that too. You know, Dr. King said we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. At the very heart of what we do in community supervision is to shepherd wins for our clients. It's the most fundamental concept in our field, no matter how many obstacles we are faced. During APPA's upcoming training institute in Chicago, you will hear a story of hope from our closing speaker, Joe Roberts. In his own words, he went from Skid Row to CEO. In 1989, he was homeless. He felt like he was hopeless. He was an opioid addict who was threatening suicide. Today, he's the CEO of a company. You know, another comment about hope I'd like to make is another young woman that I met recently who's a probation officer in a small municipal department in Opelika, Alabama. And like most small departments, the resources are scarce. She works with just one other PO. They have caseloads of 400 each. But yet, this young lady and her colleague lift me up with their can-do attitude and their array of hope. You know, my commitment for the coming years is something I've been thinking about since I joined APPA in 2016. I want to adopt really small probation departments to provide some support to them. And my hope is that larger departments will also join, kind of like a mentoring relationship, or maybe even considering establishing a sister agency type model. And beginning with Opelika, I plan to assemble a small group of volunteers to help train them and to develop SOPs for them. The third way to celebrate resilience is to lift others up. You know, my heart really goes out to the people of Ukraine. Consider how nearly impossible it is to keep the justice system going when facing a horrible war. So months ago, I reached out to contacts in the neighboring country of Poland and asked how I could help, what was going on. I wanted to interview them for my journal, for APPA's journal, I should say, our Perspectives magazine. And that conversation then shifted to asking them to do a videotape. And then, as my son would say, I had the audacity to ask them to travel to the United States to speak at our Chicago Training Institute. And I am humbled and delighted to say that the Ukraine head of probation services and the Deputy Minister of Justice are going to join us here in America and Chicago. You know, I hope this trip for them will really lift them up. And by sharing their experience of serving during a war, I'm hoping we will be called to action on some level. I'm also hoping that we'll be able to support them in their rebuilding. And this is going to be a national, or I should say a global mission. And then finally, I want to initiate a worldwide network connection of POs to share all of our work because we can learn from each other. You know, while our colleagues are in Chicago visiting with us, we're going to, as a part of our annual community service project, initiate a fundraiser to purchase laptops for them. As you might suspect, many of them fled Ukraine and went to countries like Poland to get themselves and their families to safety. And of course, many of them joined the war, and that's true for both probation officers and the people under supervision. So many of them who are still at work have no equipment. Their computers were destroyed. My hope is that every person in APPA's database will donate at least $1 to purchase computers. If this coalition wishes to help, and you don't have to attend the conference to do so, just reach out to me and we'll figure it out. Maybe you'll simply collect from staff in your respective offices and send a check earmarked to APPA to the Ukraine project. I think this is a message of lifting others up if there was never one before. Another way to lift others up is to help them to find their voices. As a woman, I pay close attention to women's issues. And I know that women make up a growing percentage in our field, about 54% are women. As an industry, I think we have to commit to ensuring that women have a voice, not just as line officers, but as leaders too. While the makeup of women is more than half, our field does not reflect an adequate percentage of women in formal leadership roles, and we have to change that. So in Chicago, we're going to host a women's symposium. That goal is to bring together women in our field to inspire them to find their voices as leaders. I'll touch on one more way to celebrate resiliency, and that is to foster flexibility. You know, having served in this field for a very, very long time, because I'm about 500 years old, but I actually served in now more than 40 years. And even with all of the madness, I have never been more encouraged. I am witnessing a groundswell and a boost in the national conversation about reform. And I announced last year that I'm going to assemble a small group of line-level practitioners to develop recommendations for transformation. It's been a little delayed, but once we get started, the group will be tasked with identifying and really creating or highlighting practices, I should say, that increase success stories and improve outcomes. We want to have a candid conversation about how to advance the field. We have to be more agile, we have to be flexible, because our pre-pandemic playbook of 2019 can't be dusted off. It has to be, so to speak, thrown away. We want to build a new and improved community corrections. And that should include standards, it should include certifications and credentialing. Last week, I was talking to one of our board members, Marcus Hodges out of CSOSA, and he used the term he said, no more reform, no more transformation talk. Let's talk eradication. So he wants us to move onward and upward because everybody recognizes that there are far too many policies, practices, and protocols that absolutely do not work for the client, for you, the staff, or for society as a whole. And of course, we're all clear that there are some agencies that are doing amazing work. I'm sure all of you are doing great work. But we also know that our field has a whole lot more to do to realize the value of the work that we put in every day. And as we're building this better tomorrow, we have to pay close attention to our youth. I mean, it sounds cliche, but the children are our future. And our goal should be to change their trajectory now so we don't see them in the adult system. In Chicago, we're actually going to feature a juvenile justice forum. We will talk rethinking approaches to condition setting and enforcement and why the traditional approaches are ineffective. And by the way, on that day, that Monday, we'll also feature a plenary session dedicated to juvenile justice. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to act now. There are a lot of things that we need to change in both the juvenile and the adult sectors, and we're going to have to foster flexibility to do that. We're going to have to be nimble. We're going to have to be willing to change to make a favorable mark. Our resiliency requires us to really lean on each other, to share ideas, to ask for support, to raise awareness, and to raise our voices. I have made it this far. You have made it this far. But we've got to continue to rise up to be stronger, bolder, and to elevate our work. So let's continue to help change lives as if our lives depend on it, because kind of, sort of, our lives depend on it. As I conclude my remarks, one last story about celebrating our resilience. I visited Los Angeles recently, and when I think of someone whose mantra is resilience, I think of Albert Banzuelos, who works in the Los Angeles County Probation Department. He shared that during the pandemic, he was reassigned to manage a brand new juvenile facility, and he and his team worked fearlessly to do not just to open the facility, but to create a new model for caring for the youth. They did this after evaluating due to the California wildfires, and they also lost a lot of time resulting from a large outbreak of positive COVID cases among both the youth and the staff. And of course, like so many community corrections folks, this team is all about the work, and I love that there's a banner outside of their facility that reads, "Heroes work here." And for me, that says it all. As a professional learning and networking organization, our focus at APPA is to ensure all in this field, not just members, but every single one of you has an opportunity to connect and to grow. Know that we are just an email or phone call away, and we would love to hear from you. It would be great if you guys would give us your perspective on various topics related to the field, especially via our online community. Again, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak. My sincere gratitude for your unwavering dedication to this work. You truly are appreciated during PPPS week and beyond because you're heroes and you are resilient. And my favorite little internet commercial is this little boy saying to another little boy, "You shine." And together again, we are a force for positive change. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the program.